We do expect to hear from the House Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries, as critics are warning that he and top Senate Democrat Chuck Schumer, speaking of which, have no path forward after plunging the country into this government shutdown.
There's no other option out of this. I don't see how this ends other than Senate Democrats folding.
The White House moments ago blaming Chuck Schumer for shutting down the government to appease his far-left critics. Listen to the vice president.
Chuck Schumer is terrified she's going to get a primary challenge from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The reason why the American people's government is shut down is because Chuck Schumer is listening to the far-left radicals in his own party because he's terrified of a primary challenge.
Senator Schumer was offered a chance to respond earlier today, but ran into some trouble. Listen to this.
Every Republican who's gone on TV the last 12 hours or so has called this the Schumer shutdown. What do you say about that name? Senator Schumer, can you hear me?
I can't hear.
Ooh, okay. David Avella is joining us now. GOPAC Chairman and Megan Hayes is here, former Biden Director of Message Planning. Some unfortunate timing there, Megan. I'm not sure. This was Caroline Leavitt just a few moments ago. We'll roll tape on her saying enough is enough with all of this.
Enough is enough. Democrats need to stop sabotaging our country and holding the American people hostage in the country. Democrats need to do their jobs. The American people want the government reopened.
So, Megan, will Democrats have to fold?
Look, I think that Democrats and Republicans both need to do their jobs here. The American people send members to Congress to keep the government open, to keep things funded. And Donald Trump was sent to Washington to lower prices. And without these healthcare subsidies, the cost of healthcare is going to skyrocket and many people are going to lose their healthcare altogether, which is not good for the overall economy. So I would urge both Democrats and Republicans to work together, find a negotiation, get the government open, and get these healthcare subsidies reinstated.
So, David, you know, a lot has been made of what Democrats were saying about this. We know what Bill Clinton said about illegal immigration and illegal aliens in his 1996 State of the Union address. We have seen what Chuck Schumer said in a similar timeline about illegal aliens gaming the system. Let's go back to 1993 and listen to what Hillary Clinton said about health care benefits for illegal aliens. Listen here.
And then finally, as to illegal aliens, we agree with you that we do not think the comprehensive health care benefits should be extended to those who are undocumented workers and illegal aliens. We do not want to do anything to encourage more illegal immigration into this country. We know now that too many people come in for medical care as it is. We certainly don't want them having the same benefits that American citizens are entitled to have.
You know, the vice president said when he was at the briefing that positions like that would be considered to be MAGA these days. How did Democrats get from where they were in the 1990s to where they are now?
John, you showed a clip there that Megan probably wasn't even born yet. How can we're showing a history here that many Democrat operatives don't even know that their party held those positions at one point. You have a much younger group of leaders in the party now that have shifted dramatically to a much more progressive approach. Now, as you think about this shutdown, when does it end? It ends when Jon Ossoff feels the pressure in Georgia, and Roy Cooper, who's running for the Senate in North Carolina, and Angie Craig in Minnesota, and Chris Pappas in New Hampshire, when they feel the pressure and they think it impacts their 2026 chances, then they go to Schumer and say, we got to vote for this. And that's where then you ultimately get the votes.
Well, Megan, I'll let you respond to that as your name was invoked. But J.D. Vance just a few moments ago made the case at that White House press briefing that this is about Chuck Schumer listening to those far left members of his party. Listen.
Let's be honest about the politics, is that Chuck Schumer is terrified she's going to get a primary challenge from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The reason why the American people's government is shut down is because Chuck Schumer is listening to the far-left radicals in his own party because he's terrified of a primary challenge. So I'd invite Chuck Schumer to join the moderate Democrats and 52 Senate Republicans, do the right thing, open up the people's government, and then let's fix health care policy for the American.
Cue up those Democrats, because Hakeem Jeffries is delivering a press conference right now. Let's dip in and listen.
We've heard nothing from any of the legislative
leaders on the Republican side, and the president has been engaging in irresponsible and unserious behavior, demonstrating that all along, Republicans wanted to shut the government down. That's no surprise, because for decades, Republicans have consistently shut the government down as part of their efforts to try to extract and jam their extreme right-wing agenda down the throats of the American people. Democrats have repeatedly made clear we are ready to sit down with anyone at any time and at any place in order now to reopen the government, to enact a spending agreement that meets the needs of the American people, and to address the devastating Republican healthcare crisis that has caused extraordinary harm on people all across the country, in rural America, working class America, urban America, small town America, the heartland of America, and black and brown communities throughout America. The Republican healthcare crisis is devastating, the likes of which no one has ever seen.
All right, so Megan, your response to Hakeem Jeffries, they're live on Capitol Hill saying the president and Republicans are unserious and demonstrating unserious behavior. Republicans wanted to shut down the government. Your reaction to what you're hearing?
So I don't think that Republicans wanted to shut down the government, just like I don't think Democrats wanted to shut down the government. I think that everyone wanted to come to a solution, but they need to come to the table to negotiate. The four leaders need to get together and figure this out. But I will say that the president's own pollster, Trump's own pollster, is saying that Republicans will lose support if they do not extend the health care subsidies. So 8 in 10 Americans actually believe that those subsidies are valuable and worthwhile. So I would just caution Republicans, the longer this goes on and people start to see their premiums increase, which will come in the next month, they will figure out how much their premiums will increase. They will start to lose support, and that will really impact in 2026. And I just want to comment on one thing that we talked about right before the press conference. Is illegal immigrants do not get federally funded health care. So that is a lie that is being spread by Republicans.
All right, so let's talk about what Jeffries just said, David, in terms of the extreme right-wing agenda, this idea of sunsetting these tax breaks in the Affordable Care Act. That was something that Democrats passed. Back in 2020, this was supposed to sunset at the end of this year. Now they're calling it an extreme right-wing agenda? It's kind of turning the tables a bit.
You make a very good point there, John. Let's keep in mind that government shutdowns have never proven effective at changing policy. It is the normal appropriations process and the normal negotiations with legislation that needs to occur where policy changes. Now, let's take them at their word. They want to spend another $1.5 billion that this country doesn't have. What they're ultimately saying is, let's go borrow more money from China and other countries that don't like us so we can have more government spending. And if you're not going to give us more government spending, we're going to shut the government down. That's why until those senators who are up next year in 2026 feel the pressure, this could go on for quite some time.
Oh, dear. All right. Well, we'll keep watching it hour by hour. Thank you so much to both of you. Megan, David, thank you.
That was 35 days back in 2018, 2019. So we'll see how long this one goes. We'll see. Thanks, folks. Appreciate it.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.